Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tony Robinson with MAP, and welcome to today's supply chain update, what's happening and what to expect, presented by Bruce Flannery and Jeff Schultz of Amco Polymers. The presentation was actually recorded on Friday afternoon, and we have Stacy Shelley of Amco here to help answer some questions at the end. I apologize for the late start. We did have some technical difficulties with the recording, but we should be all good now. Just a few notes before we get started. We will be keeping all attendees muted throughout the presentation. We are recording the webinar and it will be up on our webinar archives page in the next few days. You will need a member login to access that page, so just reach out to us if you need the recording. There is time for questions at the end of the presentation. Please use the question or chat features on the GoToWebinar pop-up to ask any questions. And if you have any logistical issues, you can use those same features and I will help you troubleshoot. With all of that being said, we will now start the recording.
Okay, thanks everyone for the opportunity to present an industry update on the plastics marketplace. Amco is more than happy to continue to provide this service to MAP members. We appreciate our membership and association with MAP and hope that you continue to find these updates valuable. Just a real quick legal disclaimer, as we've done in the prior editions here. Simply that we're happy to provide an update on the market, but do not accept any liability associated with any decisions that may be made by using this data. Okay, so I'm Jeff Schultz. I'm the product director for engineering, plastics, and application development at Amco. I've been in the industry now for 24 years and am a part of the Orlando staff here at our headquarters in Florida. Bruce?
Hi, I'm Bruce Flannery. I'm the product director for what we call the commodities, the olefins and polystyrene. My 41st year in the industry, and I'm glad to be here. Little background on Amco Polymers. We pride ourselves being a fast, flexible company with a real entrepreneurial attitude and basically part of the largest plastic distribution company in the world. Revigo is a leading plastic, chemical, and rubber distributor. Just to give you a little background, 6,000 employees, 45,000 customers worldwide, 230 worldwide locations, 1,500 suppliers, and over 20,000 product references. We're basically a 90+ person commercial employees, 42 salespeople, an application development team. We have many contractor suppliers and a world-class distribution network through Revigo. Jeff?
Okay, a little bit on the agenda. We gave a presentation back in December, and I would encourage those of you, we provided quite a bit of market detail in the December issue. So I'd encourage you to, if you can, work with Troy and figure out how you can get a copy of it. If you haven't watched it, I think it'll provide a little bit of a different twist on what we're going to give today, maybe a little bit more information, a little more background, which may make today's presentation make a little more sense. What we'll run through today is very similar to what we did in December, providing an update on the resin market. Bruce will run through the commodity business. I'll go through the engineering resins, and then we'll wrap up with some action steps that we would like to introduce as an opportunity to reduce the impact of the disruption that we're seeing in our supply chain. We introduced this back in December, and there's maybe one or two changes, and we'll just quickly run around the wheel. What we're identifying now is that these wild cards continue to present themselves. Most recently, unfortunately, the one in the middle on the bottom, global conflict now has become an even bigger issue facing our world, and ultimately will have an impact likely on our industry. But if you start, demand continues to be extremely strong. GDP, as you'll see in the presentation, is forecasted domestically to be over 4%. Bruce is going to spend some time talking through the state of logistics in the logistics industry. He'll also touch base here in just a moment on the BTU shortage, Fiberglass is something that I'm going to spend some time talking about. Flame retardants remain very short. The semiconductor chip shortage facing the automotive and the electronics industry has been all over the news now for over a year. There's a lot of M&A activity recently, the announcement of Celanese acquiring the DuPont materials business unit. Polymer availability has continued, fortunately, to improve, but still remains a bit of an issue. The COVID pandemic, labor has continued to be a problem. Inventory corrections and governmental regulations. We talked last time about China's dual energy policy and curtailing production in Asia. So all of these things seem to be happening and popping up from one time to another. Many times they're happening concurrently. Bruce, I'll pass it to you. I know you had a comment on the BTU shortage.
Right. So we're calling it the worldwide BTU shortage that kind of encompasses natural gas, natural gas, oil, coal, and actually electricity. We'll be speaking about it a little bit further on in a minute here, but just what's going on in Europe, it's affecting everything there. And we're really seeing a real potential effect on production of polymers with the prices skyrocketing and basically hitting record numbers, and especially when you start to look at electricity. So we'll speak a little bit more about that. We'll go into a little bit more, you'll understand. And also we're going to go pretty deep on the logistics, both international and domestic. So logistics is logistics, as we say. So we'll go to the next one, Jeff.
Thanks. Could you just give a quick, I don't know, there's probably 5 or 6 bullet points that I'll run through on the state of the resin market. And as Bruce just said, logistics at this point, as you'll see in the next slide, Bruce covers it, has been an issue, and the outlook, unfortunately, is not improving. Relative to product availability, producers are continuing, for the most part, to continue to ship from production. We are seeing some product lines being able to build inventory, but it's pretty slow. When you think about lead times are not going to fall until producers have been able to reestablish their inventory. We've certainly, good news, we've seen force majeures being lifted. There are still some in place, but a lot less today than when we delivered this in December, and certainly much fewer than when we did this earlier in 2021. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to remove ourselves from allocation or sales control. Heavy backlogs continue to plague the producers, and they're just not able to restore inventories to a satisfactory level at the factory in their factories. Commodity producers, Bruce will spend some time talking to this in more detail. Fortunately, they've mostly recovered from their shortages. I mentioned earlier about GDP and how strong end market demand is projected to continue through 2022. We're continuing to see price inflation on engineering resins. Fortunately, we've seen commodities coming off of their highs, although as Bruce will speak to it shortly, it appears as though they may be ready to bounce. And then, as I mentioned, glass fiber continues to be a major issue. Flame retardants as well. We do not see flame retardant additives materially improving, at least through the first half, and likely will extend through 2022. Bruce?
I wanted to share this Morgan Stanley Freight Index. A lot of folks have said that they really found this interesting and helpful for them to explain what's going on. Actually, almost don't even want to show this. The last time we showed this chart 3 months ago, the y-axis was at 10, which was a record number. They've had to now increase the y-axis to 19. That being how many loads are available for every truck that's out on the road. So what's considered a balanced supply is 2 to 3 loads available for every truck that's on the road. We've been at unbelievable numbers here. We were real tight supply, being at 9, 10. We saw that again hit us early this year. It seems like it's getting a little better at the moment. But if you start looking at the forecast as we come into produce season and everything else that's going on, these are just numbers that we've never been to before. They're so far above anything we've ever seen that we're going to probably get into the wild, wild west on truckload type business. I don't know what's going to happen. This just tells me that something's going to happen. And if you look what happened on logistics, international logistics, which we'll talk about in a minute, you saw prices to get material from China to here go from $4,000 a container to $30,000 a container. I'm not trying to say you're going to see the same thing on trucking, but we've seen many routes 2 and 3 times normal, what we would historically call normal rates. And I can only see it getting worse. So this is something we're all really going to have to keep an eye on, whether it's for yourselves on your as you're shipping your stuff out, and or whether you're trying to get materials in. Next. Then we go over to the international logistics. Well, that y-axis just went to the lowest number because now we're talking about reliability. We're at a point here where we've never seen reliability numbers so low. So this is the reliability of actually the shipping company living up to their commitment to ship a container for you. So historically, it's been, in the 80s. We're down to below 32% on a global average, and it's actually worse east-west. So, it's unbelievable to numbers that we've ever seen. But this is the reason they're so oversold and the reliability's gone down. But this is the reason that they've been able to go from $4,000 per container to $30,000. Side note that'd be a little interesting that supplier told me about the other day, and I did look it up, is that Evergreen, the folks that got a ship stuck in the Suez Canal, they had such a good year last year that they actually, their management people, and we're not talking upper management, we're talking overall management people, their bonus was 40 months of pay. That just gives you an idea of the kind of profits they're making. And what we're really seeing that, well, I'll speak to a little bit about it in the next slides when we get into the resin side, but what that's really doing is just, it's throwing everything out of whack because they're not even, as soon as the containers are empty in California, they just want them back on the boat. They don't even care if they put anything in the container. They just want the container back to Asia so they can come back again and charge us $30,000 for a load that reality was they were making money at $4,000 a load. So it's cost them $4,000 to bring it here, but they're charging us $30,000. And it's really causing the whole market to go upside down. Next slide. Jeff.
Yep, thanks, Bruce. There's been a lot of discussion around the additive shortages, whether it's fiberglass, flame retardant. I just wanted to spend the next 2 slides quickly giving an overview of where we were and where we've gone on the journey for fiberglass. So if you go back to 2019, frankly, nobody was really talking about fiberglass. At least it wasn't a topic of conversation in many of the meetings that I was having. In 2020, when COVID hit, in the first quarter, the economy began to shut down. And what ended up happening was they took fiberglass production offline. When they did that, the second half of 2020, as the economy began to rebound and really take off, it takes 3 to 6 months for these fiberglass furnaces to turn back on. You couple that with COVID-related labor issues at their facilities. Couple that with, as you can see on the chart, the capacity, how much of capacity it is in Asia. Now you're adding the logistics component to it, and the industry, the availability of fiberglass just went from being a non-issue to being a major issue through the second half of 2020 and all of last year. If you look at kind of where we are now, producers remain on force majeure. Production, fortunately, is beginning to rebuild. They are still, in fact, having COVID-related issues at the plants. So the plants are just not able to run as efficiently as what we need them to. I heard somebody recently indicate that the lines are roughly running at 75% of capacity. So they're losing, the demand is certainly there, but they're losing 25+% capacity right now due to labor disruption. You throw on again Bruce's slide and discussion on international logistics reliability. We've got compounders who are looking at getting glass deliveries in. They're expecting them in on Monday. Monday comes, no delivery. They follow up and find out that it's still on a boat on the way here. Just the reliability and the communication breakdowns that are taking place are continuing to plague our compounders. And the forecast at this point is that while supply will steadily increase, I think we'll see moderate improvement kind of month over month, but I do not necessarily see that we're going to be out of the woods on fiberglass through certainly through the first half and likely the remainder of the year. We've provided this snapshot just to give our customers an idea of kind of where product availability is and where it is constrained. Not a lot of change since our presentation in December. While you'll hear from both Bruce and I in detail on many of these product families, some of them are improving. They're just not out of a point where they're off of force majeure or some sort of sales allocation. Bruce?
Let's talk about the effects on commodity resins. Next. So basically, we got production for the most part back up. We got through the freeze last year, and as a group, as the polymer group goes, if you will, for us, us purchasing it and the producers producing it, we had the biggest effect probably in the whole world with that freeze last year. So for us, we've already been through some tough times. I think the rest of the industries, whether they're metal, everything else with this logistics issues, are going to go through some tough times now too. But anyway, for the most part, we're back up in production. We're still seeing ongoing additive issues, especially if it's the smaller stuff or materials that got affected by the hurricanes last year. They still are working out and getting better. Overall prices have bottomed out, but price increases are on the way with energy costs and shortages. And we're also going to see railcar logistics issues, which could cause producers to shut down. And part of that is due to the fact that they just can't get the material that they normally would run rail cars, take them over to the warehouse, and they're in this material that's made to be exported because the shipping lines don't even want to let them have the containers, the empty containers. They don't want to tie up the container for 2 or 3 weeks while it gets over and gets loaded. They're actually not able to export. Even though there's plenty of empty containers leaving North America, nobody wants to give them the containers. They want to get them back. So we're into a problem where they ship the rail car over to be packaged out to export. And now we can pack them, but now we can't load them anyplace. Now the warehouses in Houston are full. It's not due to lack of demand, it's lack of logistics to get the material back out of North America. So what that's doing is kind of backing up everything along the way. So we could actually see a railcar shortage and a potential producer shutting down or slowing down to match how many railcars they can get, not actually what their customers and all of us maybe need. The other part of this too on the railcar shortage is driven by the railroads being slower than usual. So railcars that normally will go out and come back, and maybe each, while they're on the railroads, they're on 10 days out and 10 days back. Now they're 20 days out and 20 days back, and that extra 20 days is lost that they can't fill that railcar. Next slide, Priscilla. So the effects on basically polyethylene. Let's speak to polyethylene first. So prices went down 15 cents a pound between October and December. The amazing part is that still 26 cents per pound, higher than January 2021. Lack of imports is really causing the producers to have pricing power. Resins used in durables are still seeing the highest demand. High density injection and blow molding are still balanced to tight, and we're still seeing strong demand. We're seeing comonomer issues. We've talked a little bit before about hexene and still additives causing headaches. I will put it that way. Hexene is going to continue for a little while. And a lot of new supply that we expected to come on early in 2022 or mid 2022 now appears to be pushed to later this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if that gets pushed into next year. Again, the problems with the shortages of logistics, manpower, and the COVID, it's not helping at all. So what do we have? We have increases on the table, and we'll see what happens, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bounce of polyethylene. Go to polypropylene, a little wilder ride. Domestic supply is available. Imports have arrived, but it was short-lived. Nobody's with the logistics issues, nobody appears to be bringing any more in. So that relief valve that was helping us bring prices back down has kind of gone away. Now we saw a lot of people with the pricing coming down. Domestic producers cut production to match actual sales. They didn't want to build inventory, nor did they have the rail cars to put them in. Prices down an average of 40 cents a pound since September September of last year through January of this year. But that still puts us up an average of almost 25 cents a pound since January of 2021. We talked before about, I'll speak to it again, worry about the bullwhip effect where everybody destocks at once and now everybody's going to go ahead and, I guess it's time to buy again. And it looks like we got a 6-cent increase in for February. Monomer did settle up to 6. We'll see how everything shakes out, but we seem to be on the road back north again on pricing for polypropylene. We go to polystyrene. Domestic supply is pretty good. Monomer issues, we had a few freeze type things this year, but nothing like last year. The big thing is lack of import availability is, again, what we said before, causing all the Americas to effect being an island for supply. So the pricing power is with the North American producers. New opportunities for polystyrene to place other resins that are short, that is happening. We're seeing people look at that and are doing that. So there is plenty of supply overall. With energy costs up and competition from overseas down, it looks like the 5-cent increase for February is in, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see some more increases coming forward. Jeff?
Thanks, Bruce. Starting with ABS, the domestic ABS market still remains tight, although it's much better than it was this time in December. Producers continue with allocation, but again, it's improving. Operating rates are high. The producers are absolutely incentivized to make as much ABS as they possibly can. So operating rates are very high. Producer inventories, hopefully they're going to be able to begin to rebuild them in the first half of the year, at which point we'll be able to see lead times begin to fall. Imported ABS prices continue to be buoyed mostly by cost of international freight. Over 30% of supply of ABS for North American demand comes from Asia, and their current raw material cost to produce is considerably lower than that of North American producers. But the unfortunate reality for our market is that the international freight cost is keeping their prices elevated, and consequently our domestic price high as well. Demand continues to look strong through the first half. I think the real wild card is international freight. If for whatever reason we found that international freight began to soften, there's no indication of that, but if we did, I think we could end up seeing some moderating in ABS prices. The spread between flame retardant and specialty ABS products, I think, is going to continue to expand, and we do anticipate prices to be relatively firm through the first half. Polycarbonate is, again, is similar to December, a very similar story to ABS. Producers are continuing to recover. General purpose polycarbonate continues to be more and more available, which is a great sign for our industry. Compounded polycarbonate continues to be tight due to compounding capacity, shortages of glass, and additives. Demand for polycarbonate remains strong as we anticipate automotive builds to continue to improve throughout the year. There is a planned turnaround of domestic polycarbonate production that's going to happen during the second quarter that's going to take a percentage of the domestic market out that'll maybe tighten things up a little bit. Import prices continue to remain elevated, similar to ABS, due to the cost of moving product from Asia to North America. Polycarbonate availability should continue to improve. That's a good sign. Prices are likely to remain firm through the first half. And if producers are able to rebuild inventories and lead times fall, I think that we may be able to see some price relief as we enter the second half of the year. Nylon 6 and 6,6 polymer, fortunately for both of these products, is no longer an issue. If we were having this conversation 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to say that. But fortunately, where we are now, polymer supply is no longer a limiting factor. The real challenge here is supply for compounded products is the real constraint. So additives, whether it's, again, repetitive theme, flame retardants, and glass, are the real constraints here. Labor at the plants at the compounding facilities is also another constraint. So you've got shortages of the additives, shortages of labor, strong demand with auto builds expected to grow by 15% this year, I think continues to drive a supply-demand imbalance and likely be looking at inflation here in the first half of the year. PBT, very similar to nylon. PBT remains very tight in and of itself, with production costs on the rise. Most PBT products have some sort of a filler or additives in them, which again has compounding issues from an availability of those additives. Demand is stronger than supply, and we will see price inflation in the first half of the year. Acetal is fortunately slowly improving, certainly for general purpose grades. Specialty grades, again, remain constrained for the reasons I've already stated with additive supply. Demand very strong. Automotive is the largest segment for acetal consumption, and with auto builds expected to climb, we're going to continue to see strong demand for acetal throughout the year. Import suppliers, common theme here again, elevated freight costs are going to continue to keep the imports at bay, expecting that availability of acetal will improve throughout the first half, and strong demand will keep prices firm also through the first half. Lastly, I'll touch base on TPU. TPU, fortunately, has really begun to improve from where it was, which was just awful. Demand, I think, is going to continue to be pretty strong throughout the rest of the year, which continues to put pressure on TPU capacity. Ether-based grades exited force majeure earlier this month, but we are still going to be in sales control and allocation, likely through the first half of the year, may continue through into the second half of the year, but do anticipate that ether supplies are going to improve, which hopefully in the second half of the year will reduce lead times. Ester-based grades supply continues to improve each month and should stabilize through second quarter. I do think that we're going to continue to see inflation in TPU. The unfortunate reality is while supply is improving, costs are up. The supply-demand imbalance is still there in favor of too much demand and not enough supply. Hopefully, as we enter the second half of the year, the inflation will abate and will stabilize. Bruce.
All right, let's talk about some action steps that you may be able to take to help alleviate these extreme supply disruptions. So here's some steps. Failure to plan and offer flexibility on delivery dates is now considered a high-risk behavior. I can't stress this enough. It's just, as you saw in that, the freight index, it just looks to potentially get even crazier than we've ever seen in our lives. When you really look at it, physical inventory is the real safety net. So you, the consumer, should be trying to get some physical inventory put aside wherever you can put some aside, and then work with your supplier to make sure that they physically have some physical inventory for you nearby. I would say that those are really important things to do. Place your POs out as far as you can to give greater visibility to your suppliers. So again, getting your orders in, basically getting your reservation, as we like to say. So I can't stress that enough. And I know, anything you can do to work in any way we can help you, working with your customers to explain to them why you need that, so that you can get that out to us, we're happy to help. If a wild card hits, be ready to place the POs if a spot opportunity presents themselves. We saw that last year, especially after the freeze, that a spot opportunity would arise and people kind of went, oh, let me check and think about it, and it would be gone by the time they came back. And I felt bad, but it's reality is when it happens, you got to be fast. And it's never too early or too late to begin the discussions of supply agreement with your suppliers. I mean, I think it's very important. It really does lay out how you want to do your business together. And it does show a partnership so that you can help work through all these crazy situations. When it comes to delivery windows, we're really saying 2 to 3 days, and even more is better versus a firm delivery date. Just in time, old delivery schedules of 2019 are really a thing of the past and are not the norm anymore in 2022 for sure. And right now, scheduling bulk and truckload deliveries, bulk has already been extremely tight. So we've been over 3 weeks in many parts of the country for months, and we're getting there for truckload deliveries. It really does help ensure availability for you. And the other thing too is it does give you a reservation. So I know when we've lost trucks, and I expect you're going to see what we call a lot of drop trucks, especially in the truckload business, where we have somebody confirmed to come in and pick a truck up to make a delivery to a customer, and at the last minute somebody outbids us by $1,000 and that truck driver just doesn't show up. The good thing is that if you had your order in and we had plenty of notice, you're going to be, as soon as we can get a load to cover that lane to get to you, you're going to come to the front of the line, if you will, because we already confirmed to you we had a truck. So again, all those types of things help. They help us schedule. They help us work with our supply partners. And I can't stress it enough that, again, communication to help overcome all these issues. I really do appreciate everybody's time, and we're here to help. Anything in any way. Thank you very much.
We have Stacy Shelley, a colleague of Bruce and Jeff, here to answer some questions and possibly offer some more insights. Stacy, did you have anything to add before we go into questions?
Well, I know when I was talking to Bruce and talking to Jeff after we recorded this on Friday, one of the things they wanted me to express is that it feels like all they get to do is give bad news. And we all think that things are improving, just not nearly at the pace that we want them to improve. What is going on globally with the Ukraine and some of the other issues that we have geopolitically will probably have some pretty significant effects on even the information that they shared with you last Friday. So we want to just make sure that everyone understands we're doing the best job we can communicating all the facts at the moment. And Bruce and Jeff wanted everybody to know that they feel like Eeyore, and they wish things were different. So they're looking forward to the opportunity that we have to do these and not have the information be so negative.
Did have a request to go over the PP slide again, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There it is. Stacy, can you talk a little bit more about the polypropylene?
Hey, Tony, I can't see your screen.
Yeah. Letha, are you still sharing it by chance?
I am not.
Are you seeing it now?
We can see it.
Yep.
There we go. So I'm not a polypropylene expert. Jim Robato, who manages our polypropylene business, spends every day waking and sleeping hours working in the polypropylene world. It has been a huge adventure over the last 12 months. Most recently, we've seen extreme drops, and now we're all of a sudden seeing a bounce back up. I can tell you that it is probably the most dynamic from a price swing market that we have. Polyethylene is not much better, but polypropylene has some pretty dramatic supply and demand swings as well. So it's a big challenge for us for sure. And polypropylene, like all of you, is a pretty staple part of your material menu. So if the polypropylene market is so rambunctious as it has been, or so unstable, it can have a lot of effect on all of us. I know that some of the polypropylene producers recently were very aggressively pushing us to buy more material because their inventories had swollen a little bit because a lot of the players were staying on the sidelines. And then that is now flipping very quickly as we have some of these global geopolitical issues going on, and there's a pretty good chance that oil prices are going to skyrocket, and everyone is trying to get material now before that happens. So it's a very dynamic market. If you have specific questions, I would recommend you send me an email. I can send it to Jim and he can get back to you directly.
We did just get another question in. You mentioned resin will be impacted by the war between Ukraine and Russia. What are some predictions of impact? When do you predict we would start seeing that impact?
Well, as always, the supply chain is long and it takes quite a while for things to move through the supply chain. But, almost every resin that we have in our industry is impacted somehow by a derivative of oil or natural gas. So it only makes sense that if the global price of oil increases dramatically, or if we have to start supplying or making up for, imports that we are no longer getting potentially from Russia and others, the costs are going to go up dramatically, and then as a result, those derivative costs are going to go up very dramatically. It takes longer for those costs to come through the supply chain for engineering resins than it does for olefins. But there's no doubt if this continues and oil continues to climb, it'll have an effect on all of us.
Question that I had was, we kind of bouncing back and forth between when these issues are going to be alleviated. Is it going to not be until 2023? Is it going to happen before the new year comes around, maybe in Q3 or Q4? What do you think, Stacy? What do you think these issues are going to maybe not go back to normal, but go back to manageable?
Yeah, I have to tell you, I wish I still had my magic 8-ball from junior high, because it might do a better job than what we're doing right now on predicting the future. I'll give you a great example. I spend a lot of my time in the engineering resin world, especially with nylon and polyesters and ABS. And I really thought that by the Q2 of this year, we would be in a much better position for glass. And I thought that even as recent as a couple of weeks ago. Now the conversations that we're having with suppliers at the end of last week, suppliers are basically saying it's going to be at least the beginning of Q3 before they start getting some relief on their glass supplies. And if that's the case, they may not lift force majeure until late in the Q3 or early in the Q4, depending on what their current supply situation is. Because as Bruce has mentioned before in some of these presentations, everybody's shipping hot pellets. There's no inventory sitting around anywhere, and inventories are going to have to be built back into the system as we come out of this. So my best magic 8-ball on the engineering resin side would be, especially for anything having to do with glass, would be that sometime hopefully in the Q3 it would get better. I know I've been told point blank that BASF is not lifting their force majeure for the Q2. So the soonest they might do it would be the Q3. We've had one supplier lift force majeure, but that's the only one that I've heard of in the nylon or ETP market when it comes to glass.
Stacy, could you give more info about pricing and polycarbonate at all?
Well, I don't live in that world every day. So again, if you have a specific question having to do with a specific product or supplier, I would ask you to send me an email, and I can get that to both the polycarbonate product managers, Mike Walter, and also to your local salesperson. I know just from being part of a lot of these market update meetings and calls that we started to see some pretty significant decreases in polycarbonate from an import perspective. But those were staggered by the large increases that are starting to come back on the shipping side of the market and actually getting shipping containers. So it appears that things are softer, that material is a little bit more readily available, as long as you're not talking about products that are FR additive type products or products that are glass filled. But I don't think that we're seeing, and we have seen, the softening that we were going to see if it wasn't for some of the issues with freight coming from overseas. That being said, the largest component in polycarbonate is benzene, and benzene is one of the largest byproducts that comes from cracking crude. And if we see these prices continue to stay very high because of this global volatility in the Ukraine issue, we could see increases very quickly with polycarbonate.
On PVC, FR, PVC, TPE/PVC for 2022, Stacy?
I would have to definitely beg off on that one. I'm not a flexibles guy. So when it comes to PVC and ETPs on the flexible side, like Santoprines and those types of things, I definitely would have to pass that along to Mike Walter, who manages those products for us. But please send me the email. I think almost everybody has my email address. If not, it's S.Shelley without the E, Tony. So sshelley@amcopolymers.com is my email, and I'll get the answers for you.
And we did just put his email in the chat in GoToWebinar, and I will include it in the follow-up email with a recording for everyone. So our last question, Stacy, what about Eastman's recovery for Triton copolyester? Is there any update with regard to the steam pipe repair?
So I'm on the phone with Eastman every day. Eastman is one of the products that I manage, and I can tell you it was already a very difficult supply situation for this year. We were going to be on about an 85% allocation for this year with Eastman materials, and that was going into the year. We're being told now that orders that we were supposed to get since the steam explosion that we did not receive will not be replaced. So our allocated numbers are just going to continue to go down, and we're not going to get material until they actually have the steam part of factory restored and they're back up and running again. As of Friday, I can tell you that they did not have a timeline. We still have orders on the books that they have not canceled for April, so that's good. But we have had a lot of our March orders already canceled. So I'm expecting that this could go on another 30 to 60 days before there's really any Triton back in the supply chain.
This is sort of a two-parter paired question. With Celanese buying DuPont, would it be good for the engineering plastic industry? And then follow up, what effect will DuPont's sale of PA6 lines have on pricing, if any? Major market shakeup or not really big news?
Well, I have to tell you that that's the biggest news in my 32 years in this industry was when that came out. I don't think it's real clear yet what that will mean. You have two of the largest suppliers to the automotive industry that will be merging. It's going to take a lot of time. It's I believe right now it's not supposed to close until November or December, and I'm not sure at this point how some of the rest of the moves in the market are going to shake out. There are a number of other players up for sale, and there are a number of other rumors in the nylon and polyester world that I think will settle out this year. So it's really too soon to tell, but there's no doubt there are going to be significant realignments in the ETP world, and especially in the nylon and polyester world. I don't think there's going to be any direct correlation on price, other than I can tell you that there are a lot of redundancies and a lot of cost savings that will take place over time. But there's a lot of other variables, as everybody knows, that go into resin pricing. So there's really no good way to say if there's going to be some type of positive or negative effect in the market. But the one thing that is for sure, there's going to be a lot of changes in the ETP market over the course of 2022.
The questions are still rolling in. If PA6 and PA66 supply is stronger than demand, why would rising prices follow that?
So, of course, anything having to do with glass is still, very, very challenging to get. If you look at the flat out feedstock costs that go into 6 and 6.6, they have steadily increased over the course of the last 3 months. So that's why we're still seeing increases on the neat resin side for nylon 6 and nylon 6.6. Again, tied back to crude, tied back to natural gas and derivatives. So you're still seeing price increases on the neat 6 and 6.6 side because of that. But those increases are much more moderate than what you would see on the glass filled side. A number of the increases that have been announced in the last 60 days have been completely based on glass. So is there a little room to negotiate on a 6 and a 6.6 increase? Potentially, if you have no glass and no FR additives? Yeah, there is. But there still has been increases in feedstock costs for those resins. If you look at Chem Data, or if you look at any of the reporting agencies, you'll see that the costs have gone up for neat nylon 6 and 6.6 over the course of the last 60 to 90 days.
Questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up. So I want to thank Bruce and Jeff, and obviously Stacy, for offering the information today. Just a reminder to everyone one last time, the recording will be made available to everyone. I'm going to send Stacy's email address and contact information out to everyone with that, so you will have access to all the information. I apologize again for the poor audio quality, and we're going to work to fix that moving forward. Thank you to all attendees for being here, and I will now end the webinar. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.